Hello everybody and welcome back to Out of Body's 31 Days of October. I feel like I say October or Halloween, whatever it is, this month. I always say it different every time, I feel like. Anyway, welcome to my channel. Today I'm going to be talking about the experiences that I had when I visited a supposedly haunted house. It was the Magevney house. Now I've already profiled some information about this home, so if you haven't seen that video, you might want to watch that one first. And then come back to this one. But if you'd like to hear more about that, keep watching. So, like I said in my last video, I have toured this home. I didn't want to ruin it for you guys in the last video and talk about what I experienced. I toured it before I ever read about it. So when I talk about some of the things that I experienced those things before I knew anything about the house, because I took the tour before I ever read about it. So that is why once I read about it, I ended up finding some things that corresponded with what I experienced, and I'll give examples of that here in a minute. Well, once again, I didn't really take any pictures when I came to this house, kind of like when I did my video on the Woodruff Fontaine house going there. I did take a picture of the front of it, so here's that. Yeah, basically as soon as I got in that home, I felt so much energy, it kind of hit me like a ton of bricks. Like when I went to the Woodruff Fontaine, like I could kind of sense a little bit, but it wasn't as heightened when I first walked in. For one thing, because I walked in the back door. They don't have you go in the front door in that house. But in the Magevney home, you go straight through the front door into the entryway. And immediately when we got in there, I mean, it was a little bit stuffy because there's no AC in there. But it was more than that. I also just felt like this very, very like just wave of energy, just like boom, right on me. Let's see. So as soon as we walked in, the really nice lady, tour guide, just started talking to us right away and started talking to us about the history. At this point, we're just standing kind of in the breezeway. It's kind of like a hallway, but it goes down the middle of the house. So when you first walk in, you're in this breezeway, like this elongated breezeway, and then there's rooms on either side of it. As soon as the tour guide turns to take us into the first room, which is kind of the living area, I saw a painting of who I now know to be Mr. Magevney, but at the time I didn't know who it was, or I couldn't have known, because I hadn't read anything about this house. I didn't know what he looked like. I didn't know anything about the family. But as soon as I walked in there and saw that painting, the thought or the message or whatever just came into my mind. All of a sudden, that's Mr. Magevney. That's Mr. Magevney. Like, it was just there in my mind. That's kind of how I get, you know, messages or kind of like psychic, if you will, kind of things in my head. You know, that's how it comes. It's just automatic as soon as I see something or come in contact with something. So we entered that room and immediately I could feel the presence of someone. Now I could feel it over to my left, and I will insert a picture over here and kind of circle. It's not a picture that I took, it's just a picture I found online of the room. But when I was standing in that room, I was standing kind of in the corner next to that, I think it's a piano or something, or I was standing right in front of that chair next to the piano, and where I've circled over there is where I felt a presence. It was on my left side, and it was just kind of this really intense, kind of vibrating presence, a very strong presence. I wouldn't say a negative presence. I wouldn't necessarily say positive, like super positive. The presence just seemed very strong and very much almost like somebody was like intently watching us, like making his presence, his or her, I will say, but I have my theories on who it was. They were making their presence known. It was almost as if it was like a pride thing, like whoever this was is very prideful about this house and wanted to make sure that we didn't mean any harm and that we were coming in there with, you know, the best intentions. You know, he just seemed like he was, I'm just gonna go ahead and say he, because I feel like I know who it was, but he was just, you know, almost like standing there, just leering over us, and very strong presence. Felt like he was just kind of watching us, almost like a hawk. So now, there were other paintings in that room. There was a painting of another man in that room, but when I looked at the painting that was over the fireplace of Mr. Magevney, I just automatically knew that that was him, even though I had no prior knowledge of the family. There was also a painting of his wife, Mary, in that room. I'll have to ask my mom and my brother if they remember or noticed, but I kept looking over to my left. I kept looking over my shoulder and just like staring and like, am I imagining that or is that really there? Like I just felt this intense presence right there and I just kept looking over. They might remember me doing that and probably wondering what the heck I was doing. So at this point I wasn't sure who the presence was. By the end of the visit I kind of figured it out, but it's one of those things where I felt an intense presence, but it's almost like he didn't want me to know who he was. Because I think, you know, he was aware that I could sense things, and maybe he knew that I knew he was there. That's another reason why I kept looking over there, because I was kind of like, I know you're there, like, who are you? You know, I didn't feel like I heard anything from him until we were leaving. So then the tour guide takes us into the first bedroom that's there at the front of the house, across the breezeway. Before we even go into that bedroom, we're just standing in the breezeway. She was I can't remember right now what she was talking about at that moment, but she wasn't talking about that bedroom yet. But I kind of looked in there and I saw a picture of a nun. As soon as I saw that picture of the nun, the name Mary came in my head. And I was confused in that moment because the tour guide just got through telling us that Mr. Magevney's wife was named Mary. So I'm looking at this picture of a nun. It's like a big picture in the bedroom, and this name Mary keeps coming into my head like over and over again. I'm like, that can't be right. Am I just imagining that? Like that can't be right unless like I'm getting, somehow my brain is like getting confused and comparing the nun to, you know, the Virgin Mary or something. I don't know. I was confused in that moment because I was like, okay, his wife's name was Mary. So whoever that lady is in the painting or in the photo is not his wife because it's a nun, you know? So it's like, I don't know who she is. And I just thought, okay, I'm just going to wait and see what the tour guide says. So as soon as we get into that room, the first thing that the tour guide says is she points to that photo of, I think it was a photo. I don't think it was a painting. It was an actual photo of the nun. She points to it and says, now this is a photo of Mr. and Mrs. Magevney's oldest daughter, Mary. Now, before this, she hadn't mentioned their kids at all. She might have mentioned they had 2 daughters, but she didn't mention their names at all at this point. So that's why I was so confused when we were in the hallway. I was like, why do I keep hearing the name Mary when his wife's name was Mary? I don't even know who else was in the home. Like, I don't know what their kids' names were. Like, and I didn't even know that they had a kid that became a nun. Like, she didn't tell us any of that yet. But I somehow, when I saw that picture, I knew the name of that nun. Now that's very, very weird, but also, I mean, goes to show that I really do, you know, it was very validating because I felt like, okay, I really do have these abilities. Like, I really do receive some sort of, and maybe just psychic, that I kind of an all-knowing that I just know, or it might be that the spirits there were telling me. I'm not sure. I think there's a little bit of both. But yeah, so that was very cryptic whenever we got into that bedroom. And the first thing that tour guide does is she points up at that picture and says, this is Mr. and Mrs. Magevney's eldest daughter, Mary, who became a nun. And I just kind of stared at her for a second. I just nodded my head. Like, yep, I knew that already. So anyway, that was pretty validating. And then she goes on to talk about the other daughter, Kate, and how Kate had actually adopted a daughter of her own at one point. And then she just takes us further through the home, into the kitchen. Yeah, and kind of the kitchen and dining area back there. There's another bedroom back there as well, towards the back of the house. So when we had the tour, I'm just remembering, I don't think we went upstairs. I think she just showed us the ground floor. But anyway, she takes us back through the next bedroom and into the kitchen area. The entire time that we are walking through, and we're walking through fairly slowly, that presence that was on my left in the living area never left me. It stayed either kind of around me, behind me, to my left, it stayed and lingered somewhere around me during the entire tour until we stepped out of the house in the back. That is how long that same presence, that intense kind of presence, was with me. So by the time we left, I had felt like, even though that particular spirit was not communicating with me, he was just very, very much there. I felt like kind of protecting the place maybe, and kind of watching us and making sure we weren't up to no good, or I don't know. But it didn't feel negative. I mean, I wasn't scared. I didn't feel scared or anything, but I was just kind of confused because I was like, I'm feeling such an intense presence. But whoever this is isn't communicating with me, at least until we were leaving. Now, when we started walking out the back door, I could still feel the presence a little bit, and I felt like I kind of got this message. I kind of got this feeling, not specific words necessarily, but I kind of got this feeling that he hadn't said anything the entire time, but I got this feeling that he was finally saying, like, thank you for coming, thank you for listening, and I got the feeling that he was saying thank you to me, and I said it back, you know, in my head, you know, like I communicated that way, and I said thank you, you know, appreciate you letting us see your home. So that's the only kind of communication I felt like I had with that spirit at that point. So as we were walking away from the house, I felt like, okay, I think I know who that was. I feel like that was probably Mr. Magevney, which this entire time you guys are probably like, duh. But, you know, I mean, really, I wasn't getting anything from the presence the entire time. I just felt this presence, and that's odd for me. Usually when I feel a presence, like, I get messages. I just do. I get words in my head. I get something. But I didn't get anything from him until we were leaving. It was like he was glad we were leaving, but he was also glad that we came. He said thank you, you know, and I said it back, and then I felt him leave. That's when I felt the relief, and I felt his presence leave me and go back in the house. That was really interesting, and now, in hindsight, now that I have read about the house and I've read about the supposed hauntings, which the tour guide didn't tell us about, I forgot to ask. I was in such a hurry that day, I forgot to even ask, but for one thing, I was feeling so much energy myself that I felt like I didn't even have to ask. I already knew that something was there. But now in hindsight, once I read more about the supposed hauntings, and like I talked about in my last video, how a lot of people have gone in there and felt very uneasy or felt something very unpleasant and left, and they just didn't want to be in the home, or they'd stay outside, or they'd come running out of there with tears in their eyes. Now that well, I went there first, but now that I read that, I can understand how people would get that vibe. Because when I was in there, it was very intense. Now, I'm not one that scares easily to those kind of things. I'm not saying I'm not afraid of anything, but when I'm knowingly going into a house that I know is supposedly haunted, I knew that going into it, but I didn't know anything else about it. So, I mean, I kind of prepare myself when I do that, and I make sure that I, you know, give off a very positive vibe, and I'm very confident, you know, on the inside, and, you know, that I give off this vibe that I'm not here to exploit anything, I'm not here to conjure anything, I'm just here to observe and learn, hopefully help others learn about the history. I think that's partly why, you know, it didn't scare me or anything, because I was already prepared. But I was surprised when I felt that intense presence, and I wasn't sure who it was, and it was very intense. I was a little, not scared, but I was just a little perturbed for a while. I was confused. I was like, okay, who is this? And then by the time we left, like I said, I felt like I got a little bit of communication from the spirit, and so I felt like I knew who it was, even though he didn't tell me. I feel like I know that it was Mr. Magevney. I think he stays there, or maybe visits there. Maybe he's not stuck there. He probably, it seemed like to me he likes it there. Like, he has very much pride in his home. He loved the house. I think he probably wants to make sure that nobody's going to, you know, change it too much or do anything destructive. You know, I mean, he likes his house, you know, he wants to stay there and take care of it. And it could be that sometimes when, you know, other people felt something really, really creepy, it might be that they were feeling the same thing that I was feeling, but because maybe they don't know a lot about spirits, they just got really scared and left, or maybe he could sense something in them that he didn't like for whatever reason and decided to kind of be more intense with them and to give them a very uneasy feeling and to make them upset and leave. Sometimes when that happens, it might have been a day where he just didn't want anybody in the house. You know, it could be that. I don't really think it's the case where he doesn't know that he's dead. It could be, I guess, but I feel like he knows that. He also still has a lot of pride in that house and feels like it's still his, and he wants to make sure it's taken care of. So it's pretty interesting. I think the whole experience at that house was really, I mean, it was really fun to tour it, and it was just a crazy experience. I mean, it just as crazy as the one that I had at the Woodruff Fontaine, you know. It makes me excited to keep going to more of these places and seeing what I experience and doing videos on them. Hopefully at some point I will be able to do an actual paranormal investigation somewhere and vlog it so you guys can come with me so you don't just have to rely on hearsay, you know, when I'm sitting here talking about it. I mean, I'm completely honest with you guys. Whether you believe it is completely up to you. I don't expect you to believe any of this. You can just find it interesting, if nothing else, for the historic value. But that is the end of this video. I really appreciate you guys watching. I can't believe that this month is like coming to an end. Like, we've got less than 2 weeks, barely like a week left. And I'm really sad because I've enjoyed this, but I'm also, you know, I guess I will be glad to get some rest, you know, because I've been working really hard this month. But anyway, I really appreciate you guys watching. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I hope you have a great night, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.